Good morning, my dear viewers, and welcome in this live session with the Getty once again under the hashtag Disruptive Education Movement. It's a Sunday morning, a very exciting day for all of us. We are all set to listen to Mr. Amit Gujarati, who has joined us today from Mumbai. He is the co founder and director of the Sect Edu Solutions Private Limited. It's a company which is engaged in designing and manufacturing educational kits. Well, Mr. Amit has been associated with education for past 10 years, working closely with students, teachers, and principals. And he is an advocate of learning by doing as being the best methodology for students. We all know that. Well, today he has joined us to talk on the importance of learning by doing. And why do we need this to be there in our classrooms? Why is it required to be adopted across the whole spectrum of schools? We all know kids love to enjoy when they are playing. They are more engrossed with the equipments, with materials, with something they are involved in rather than learning something, mugging up. So I think without taking much time, I would request Sir to please take over the session. A very warm welcome to you once again.
Thank you so much, Preena. Thank you for the great words that you put across. It is a pleasure to be here on this platform. Thank you to Getty for allowing this opportunity for us to share our thoughts and views about this particular topic. As Preena mentioned, that I am a part of Dissect Edu Solutions. We've worked with more than 12,000 students and worked with more than about 800 teachers during the last uh, 3-4 years of our stint. And I've been into the education field for more than 10 years now. Um, Before we get into the whole topic of learning by doing, I would like to actually do a very quick activity with Preena. She would help me out with the activity. So,
Yes, sir,
Preena,
I'm all set for my Sunday.
yeah. So, I suppose you have two very simple things which I requested you to keep handy.
Yes,
So, you have a
yes,
pen and a paper with you.
yes, sir, I have.
So this activity can be performed by anyone who is listening to us, and they also have a pen and paper handy. Um,
Okay. Yes, I
so
mean, people can join us, the viewers can join in.
yeah, so
Yeah, they can have a pencil and a paper and follow the instructions given by Sir. Yes, sir.
yeah, so this is going to be a very quick 1 minute activity, and the activity is very simple. The instruction is just one. I'll give you a minute, and you have to do something. Do something with pen and paper. The only condition is that the starting state at the start of the minute and ending state of the pen and paper cannot be same. It cannot be in untouched position, right? So you need to do something out of pen and paper. You get it?
Maybe if you can repeat the instructions, your voice was breaking. I could not hear you properly.
So I said that you have to do something with your pen and paper, and it could be anything. You can use one of the material or both the materials, but you have 1 minute, and you cannot just leave it as it is. So there has to be some change which happens during that 1 minute to that pen and paper.
So I can draw anything, or do I have to write anything?
Up to you. You decide.
Okay, okay.
So your minute starts now.
All right.
All those who have joined us for this session, first of all, thank you so much for spending time with us on a Sunday. If you are doing this activity, then great. You can write your uh, output in the chat box, what you have done. If not, you run a thought experiment about what you would do, and maybe give your answer in the chat box about what you're going to make out of this. So it could be like, for example, I would make a sketch of a bird, as simple as that.
Okay, so all of you can try this and do something with the paper and the pencil. And you can share your pictures in the comment box if you wish to after 1 minute. I think
That
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 would
would be
do,
great.
sir.
So your minute is almost up. You're ready with your
Yes.
output? Yeah. If you can show everyone, if you can tell what you've done.
Well, I was trying to fold my sheet in two different directions. It was
Right.
front in the front side and then the opposite side. So that's what I did.
Okay. Okay. So you would eventually have made probably a fan out of it.
Yes, sort of. Yes.
Perfect. Great. So now what I want to bring to your notice is no matter what your output is, it doesn't matter. Okay. For this particular activity here right now, I want to rewind back and go back to the point of time at which you decided, okay, I'm going to do this. Okay. And I want you to think about what your thoughts were after that point in time when you had already decided you're going to do this. So if you can maybe come out, if you can tell what your thoughts were, was it like crazy, like beginning before you had decided? Was it much less number of thoughts? Were what was it like?
Well, the moment I decided I'm going to fold this, I thought it's going to be much fun in folding, and I will come up with a fan that we
Right,
used to do it in our school. That's how we
right.
learned. So
Okay,
these were few thoughts that came across.
okay, okay. But you were basically fully involved into the process of making the fan.
Yes, I was very much focused in folding my sheet.
Right. Right. So this is the crux of the whole matter. When you are actually doing something and that something is interesting for you, you essentially are fully involved in the whole process of doing that. And while you are involved fully, you learn a lot from the process. And we want to do that for every child out there. When they are learning new stuff, it becomes really not very interesting when somebody is just speaking about the stuff rather than the child experiencing the stuff firsthand. So that is all learning by doing is all about. I'll start my screen share so that we can go in more detail about this subject.
Sure, sir.
Let me know if you can actually see the screen that I have up for you. Is it up?
Yes, sir. Yes. Let's do
Yeah. So
something. Yep.
we just finished this activity where we did something and we just observed that doing is much more fun than just listening about it.
Absolutely.
Um, as I said, this is the crux of the matter. If you really want to learn how to ride a bicycle, you cannot read it in book and say that okay, now I know how to ride a bicycle. You need to actually sit on it, learn to pedal by yourself, learn to balance by yourself, fail a few times, and then you would succeed. And it applies to any of the skill that you acquire in your life, right? Be it any kind of play or be it any kind of skill, maybe cooking, swimming. You it depends on what you are trying to learn, and learning happens only by doing in a much more deeper manner compared to just reading out of a book. And more specifically so for children because they are much more into the experience part of the world rather than a grown up adult who might be actually thinking from an intellectual perspective on things. So we need to incorporate this learning by doing methodology into the classroom. And let's see why and how, who has advocated this learning by doing theories. So there are a lot of people in the in the education space, who could have found their way on this page, but we really like these four, uh, stalwarts really in the education space. John Dewey is like the father of learning by doing. He's almost like a pioneer. Um, his belief was that hands-on learning utilizes the senses and the capacity of the student, and it is the most effective way to transfer any kind of learning. um, in fact, he was very assertive about the fact that whatever happens in usually whatever happens in the classrooms, where the children are given a lot of literature about the topic before they can even do anything on the topic, is really not the most effective way. He believed the child has to be active and into the whole process of learning, and the literature is essentially just to be given at the end of the whole process. It is just a summative of everything that the child has experienced. Imagine that a friend of yours comes and tells you that let's go for a murder mystery movie. So and so character in the movie is the murderer. That is the kind of treatment that we give children when we introduce the topic through a lot of literature without giving them any experience of what that concept is about. The next on the list is Maria Montessori, and of course, most of us would be knowing her because of the Montessori schools that are there. She was really, a game changer in the whole scenario. If you say, schools before her, just about 100 years ago, were very different compared to the schools that we see now. Uh, at the early childhood level. The furniture was very large. It was made for adults. The desk and bench were made for adults. There was no playing area or that kind of space within the classroom. Uh, there were almost no manipulatives which were used in any classrooms. Nothing was very much accessible to students, and she redesigned the whole classroom. So the benches and desks became smaller, the furniture was smaller, the manipulatives were introduced where they can actually feel and touch and see and experience the whole concept that is being taught. And the whole environment was made very friendly for the child. She also acknowledged every child as an individual. They are not just all similar, they are all individuals. They all have personality, characters, and traits, and they all will have different speeds at which they would be learning. And so, as an educator, you need to treat each and every child as an individual. This is the idea which is basically coming from Maria Montessori. Another very important person is Rudolf Steiner. He has developed a child development theory, and according to that theory, the child development happens in three phases. So the phase one is from 0 to 7 years of the age. Phase two is 7 to 14 years, and phase three is 14 to and going forward. And the first phase is essentially where the child is really a doer. They want to do everything. If you see a small child, they want to really go about doing everything. They would experience every new experience. If you put them on a playground, they would want to do everything. Play in the mud, they would pull out earthworms and enjoy the seesaw or the slide, and they would want to do everything. They cannot sit at one place and just be watching things happening. They want to be involved in everything. So your curriculum needs to match that kind of child's development. They are the doers. From 7 to 14, the child is developing emotionally, and the imagination kicks in. Imagination power of the child kicks in, and you need to have a curriculum which matches that kind of development. So your creativity, your emotions, your personality, your character is getting built during that 7 to 14 years of age, and your curriculum needs to match that kind of growth. And then the intellectual part kicks in after maybe 13, 14 years, where you really use your brain and you really use that for advancing whatever knowledge you have, gaining more knowledge that you can gain through various means that you have. Sir Ken Robinson is one of my favorites. We just lost him last year due to cancer, and he was basically someone who kind of wanted major reforms at system level. Uh, he believed that the current way of education is not helping in developing the creativity of the child adequately, and he had a lot of ways in which the education system can change. He was also not very happy with standardized tests that we do. Again, something which goes back to what Maria Montessori said, that every child is different, and that's why you cannot test the abilities and capabilities of every child similarly. Also, he was not very happy with the fact that somebody in the office of a board somewhere in a metropolitan city decides how education should happen, even at a rural school, and he wanted that the whole system should be geared in such a way that the people who are really working at the ground level should be the ones who decide how education happens. So, really, this is a very small snippet on what these guys wanted to do, but all of them have a common chain where they all want the child to be active rather than a child being a passive listener. So, what is happening in the world right now, and specifically focusing even on India, is we traditionally have a transmission kind of classroom. If you think about a radio station, there is a transmission tower and that keeps on emitting a lot of information. It could be music, it could be news, it could be anything. There is a lot of information which is being transmitted, and there are small receivers at each and every home, and these receivers pick up that transmission and play it for the user. Now, in this system, there is no feedback loop. The transmission tower has no way of knowing whether the radio is receiving this particular information or not, and that's why this is an incomplete mode, so to speak, when it comes to uh, classroom. Because this is what happens in our classrooms. There is a active teacher and passive listeners as students. uh, Many countries have realized that this is something that needs to change, and they have moved and brought in an active learner kind of concept within their classroom. Even Indian boards have realized this some time back that things need to change. If you look at the national education policy of 2020, even that is speaking a lot about how experiential learning needs to be part of each and every grade and each and every subject that you are teaching. So, although there has been some transformation in the form of e-class being introduced, but the delivery mechanism is not changing at the speed at which it should be changing. So what do we need now? We need to have a classroom where the transmission mode is done away with, and learning by doing is brought into the picture. It gives an opportunity for students to experience the whole concept. We move away from teaching to the test, like we are preparing students for tests and tests only, but we need to prepare them for much more. We need to build competencies for multiple disciplines, and learning by doing is one way of ensuring that. So this is already happening in India to a certain level, but the speed at which it is happening is really very slow and needs to pick up. So, how would a really good learning by doing system look? Let's look at some of the features which should be there. The first one you can see is relevance. Now, when we talk about relevance of a particular concept for a child, there are two ways to look at it. The first way is that whether the topic is age appropriate for the child, for them to understand and absorb and you know uh, learn about it at a particular age. But from the perspective of the child, the topic should be interesting and relevant. That also needs to be taken care of. In fact, in the new way of doing things in the educational system, which is more effective, you basically need to ensure that the child finds it relevant. If I were to just give a lecture or a literature about something, it is definitely not relevant for the child compared to the child involved in doing some activity where the child finds interests. How do you achieve this? You You can use manipulatives, you can use various different ways in which you can have an active child. You can do role plays, you can do experiments, you can do board games, you can do card games, you can do um, model building. So many ways in which you can get the child to become active and find their own relevance of learning a new concept. Through the discipline is something where whenever you are teaching a particular subject, you need to follow the discipline. Discipline is the subject, right? I'll give you a very quick short example, small story about S Ramanujan, and the great mathematician who did a lot of work in mathematics. And you know just to give you an example, he had actually done 3900 identities and equations by the age of 32 uh, when he died. So in such a small time period in which he was active in the field of mathematics, he has contributed huge amount of deal. And what happened, I'll cut the long story short, is he sent his work to a lot of people in the mathematics fraternity uh, across the world, and some of them felt that he was a fraud. It was after a lot of reaching out that he reached Professor Hardy, and Professor Hardy was intrigued by his work. Eventually, he wanted Ramanujan to explain how he had reached to these identities and equations. And Ramanujan couldn't explain how he had reached on those conclusions and identities. He said that the goddess, Ramanujan said that my goddess talks to me, and when she approves of a particular equation, that is the equation that I put it on paper. And this was not really acceptable to Professor Hardy. He was a hardcore mathematician, and he knew that for anyone to accept these kind of equations or identities in the mathematics world, you would need proofs, and you would have to have shown how you have derived this identity. So he made Ramanujan uh, write those proofs. So the discipline of mathematics is writing those steps and reaching your conclusion. The discipline of science is actually doing experiments. You start with an aim, you collect the materials, you do a process, you make an observation and find your conclusion. Imagine not following this process by Thomas Alva Edison. He was working on the bulb and made 2774 attempts with just one kind of filament, of a bamboo filament. And if he had not noted down that what was the process he followed in each time, he might have ended up repeating the whole experiment multiple times. But uh, the discipline of science requires experimenting and noting down your results. Same way, for somebody would argue discipline of geography would require exploring places. So, when you work with a particular subject, try to bring that subject onto the table for the child to understand what really that subject constitutes. Lower and higher order thinking skills are something of my favorite. I like to introduce you using an example. Imagine you are given a barometer. Now, this is a very simple instrument which measures the atmospheric pressure, and you are asked that with the barometer and barometer only, try to find the height of the building. So, how would you use the barometer? One of the easiest way is to maybe put the barometer, then mark a level, put another, again the same barometer on top of it, mark that second level, third level, and you find the height of the building in terms of so many lengths of barometers. Or you could do the same thing, stacking of barometer, and find the height of one floor multiplied by the number of floors. You can use another concept of mathematics where you find the length of shadow of the building during some point of time in the day, and at the same time you find the shadow of the length of shadow of the barometer. and then you use proportionality and you can find out the height. You could actually throw the parameter from top of the building, and you can just time it, how much time it takes for the parameter to hit the ground, and using formulae you can plug in the value for acceleration due to gravity and find out what is the height of the building. There's so many ways in which you can find the height of the building, but one way which is uh, the one where we use the parameter for its own purpose is you find out the pressure of atmosphere at the bottom of the building and pressure of atmosphere at the top of the building, and you will find a difference because the atmospheric pressure changes at lower levels and higher levels, it is different. And then you do some calculations and find out the height of the building. Now, the instance where I'm using the barometer for measuring pressure, that's its function. If I'm using the barometer for doing that, I'm using a lower order thinking skill. But when I'm using the barometer in all the other ways, so barometer is not usually made for measuring height or length, but I used it for measuring length. I used it for measuring shadow. I used it for throwing as an object. So those are the things where I went beyond the stated use of a particular object, and I thought about a new way of using that object. That is a higher order thinking skill. So your curriculum, when you are designing, you need to find out ways by which you imbibe this into the child's mind, where the child is not limited by whatever they are given. They can use this in a different way. A very connected one is transfer of learning. Now, there was this uh, documentary. I think it even got converted into a film. There was a book about a African boy who, harnessed the power of wind, and the village was basically starving, and he found materials from uh, junkyard and used his knowledge which he had gained in school and after school and made electricity, and using that electricity he was able to come out of famine and bring this whole village out of the famine because he was able to draw water using that electricity. Now I think William Kamkwamba, if I'm not making a mistake in the name. So that boy actually used whatever he had learned to a life situation. This is what transfer of learning is. You don't keep your learning within the classroom, you actually apply it to your life. And then finally, whenever you are working with a child, you teach them how to learn. This has to be like the ultimate goal, teaching them how to learn. It's the proverb that I have written here gives a very good idea about why this is so important. Give a man a fish and you feed him for a day. Teach a man two fish and you feed him for a lifetime. So while we are teaching the children new concepts, we need to ensure that we are transferring the skill of learning new concepts by themselves. And once that skill is learned, only sky is the limit for such a child. So these are some of the things which you need to ensure while you are creating a curriculum for your school, for your classroom. How you are when you are converting from a transmission based learning methodology, teaching methodology, to a learning by doing based methodology. Now, there is some research, there is a lot of research. Some of it I have actually put across here on the screen for you, where it is very clear that learning by doing is really effective. Teachers definitely see the effect of learning by doing in a positive manner. Teachers would like to do more activities in learning by doing methodology if there was more time. Some schools, some level of students prefer to learn in learning by doing methodology much more than others. If you look at, really the university and college results, there is a stark difference in the uh, understanding levels of concepts when it comes to learning by doing. The white bars are the bars which show how much a child learned about when they were engaged in the activity. And there are some uh, researches where learners were hooked onto some electrodes, the EEGs, and they studied about how the brain waves and the brain patterns are changing with respect to the learning process when a child is just told about what a concept is versus when a child is shown how the concept is in action versus when the child is actually able to perform the activity and get an experience out of it. So when it was the third case where they were actually able to do a lot of activities, it stimulates the premotor cortex of the mind, of the brain, in a much larger way. I've given names of research, the people who have done the research here. If you want more details about these articles, you can definitely contact me, and we would be happy to share these articles and research papers. Now, we've all seen why and what why it is needed for a big change from the current system to a learning by doing system. But it definitely has some teething issues, and I say teething issues because whenever you change from one way of doing things to another, you definitely have some challenges, and you need to overcome those challenges. Um, One of the most important and the crucial challenges would be that every educator who is engaged in this process of teaching, they need to move from that psyche of transmission to actually learning by doing and active learners. So this is a very big paradigm shift in the way in which an educator looks at the classroom. So because everything in the classroom is going to change. Now, for that, you also need to have a curriculum. So there needs to be someone who is actually making these manipulatives, deciding about which concepts they need to move to a learning by doing methodology, what manipulatives to be used, in which manner, and how they will impact the learning. The time required for conducting these sessions and the classroom management, because these classrooms tend to be noisy, and as per the traditional uh, conditioning that we have, we don't like noisy classrooms, but these kind of classrooms tend to become noisy. Noise is no measure for how much a child is learning. So we have that notion that if a classroom is quiet, they are learning, but that is misplaced. As I said, in curriculum development, you need to manage how the manipulatives would be uh, collected, how the manipulatives would be stored, how the manipulatives would be distributed at the time of doing you know the activities, and how they would be again restored or disposed of. So managing the manipulatives is something which needs to be taken up as a process. Again, if you change the whole way in which you are teaching stuff to children, if you are changing even if a part of it, you need to change the way in which you assess the child. You cannot have the same pen and paper assessment after doing this whole exercise of changing your classrooms. It might so happen that a child is very good at understanding a concept, and they are very good at performing the concept. They have a very good internal uh, knowledge or understanding about the concept, but when it comes to writing it down on paper, the articulation is weak, and you would assess that a child is not very good at understanding the concept, which is the problem with pen and paper assessments. Or it could be the other way around: the child is not really able to understand what is happening in classroom, but he is able to memorize stuff very easily. and the assessment of pen and paper would say that okay, this child knows a particular subject. So assessment methodology of learning by doing needs to change. You need to assess using activities. If you have taught them using activities, the assessment also needs to be done using activities. And again, the assessment metrics, how you grade a child needs to change from whatever it is in the current scenario. So these are some of the challenges. It's not that they are not over, you cannot overcome them. There are countries who are implementing these working on these challenges, and they have implemented many of the things in a really great manner. So these are definitely something which we can overcome, but you need to keep a mind about what is happening. So that's about it from my side, Preena. If anyone has questions, I would be happy to answer them. Um, if you would like to get in touch with us, I could leave our contact details on the chat.
Thank you so much, sir. I think it was very interesting, especially those examples given by you. We all have been talking about this methodology, learning by doing, since beginning. Even at the time when the parents are raising their children, they make sure that the child is learning how to walk, how to scroll. So they make them do it. That's
Right.
how they begin. But then as the
Yeah.
child grows, the concept is blurred and gone away because they are more focused on the road learning part. They should write and they should learn. We all know
Right.
that this form of education where children learn by doing, it makes the session more interesting for them instead of
Yeah.
simply listening to the teacher or any lecture that is going on. They that this method actually engages them with the
Right.
subject to solve a problem, and it actually makes them curious. That's the
Yeah.
best part. If they are curious, they are engaged, they are involved, they are learning. And I think the challenges you mentioned are very much there. We talk about the time management because teachers are loaded with so many other things. They have to take care of other things as well. They have to
Right.
make sure that the syllabus is completed on time. They have to take care of the copy correction, and so many things happening. So many events are there in school, and the facilities. That's the biggest challenge. What I feel is, if you are trying to make them learn anything, you have to be well equipped with things, with the material they can use to learn.
So you are right in saying that they would have a lot of challenges in doing this. But if you really put your mind to it, and if the school, if the teacher, if the educator is really into it, then
Yeah.
it is not very difficult to find simple manipulatives which work with the children in the current setup, and
Yes.
work your way through to start doing that change. If
Right. Right.
everyone starts making the change, that would become the regular normal practice, and that's what is required. That over the next few years we move from a system which we know clearly is something which needs improvement, and we
Hmm.
also know there is another system which is really the answer to many of the issues that we are facing in the current system. So
Right.
it is more about how and when we start moving. It is high
Hmm.
time that we start doing it right away.
Right. We can do it as educators. And in fact, there are so many options available in the market. They can, you know, buy them and use it in the schools. And I think DIYs are the best. If at all
Yeah,
you are not able to, get anything or you're unable to find anything, DIYs, they can help and come up with something creative that can
yeah,
help the students in the classroom.
sure.
I think in the learning process. Yes, but there is another challenge coming from another stakeholder. If I talk about the parents,
Right.
they are more concerned about the writing part. Like we have been talking about the hands-on learning, experiential learning. NEP says the same. We have so many curriculums available in the market where we focus on the methodology, where we teach them by doing, by activities. But then questions coming from the parents' side, how to handle them, because they don't understand this. I won't say all of
So
them, but then majority.
yeah, no, I mean, this is a very common concern among parents that, at the end of the day, results in the test matter. And which is right, the whole system is currently geared in a way that it measures the output of the test. So it is not just at the ground level where the change has to be implemented, and that is all where the change is implemented. This has to be a systemic change. As I said, you cannot have the same assessment system when you are using a different methodology of teaching. And also, we need to be very mindful that we are not saying that we need to totally remove whatever we are doing. Some of the things that the current education system is providing is really great, and we need to preserve those. But the way in which the delivery mechanism is, that needs to change at the base. When a child is introduced to the concept, the understanding level of the child at when you do it in a traditional manner versus the way in which you do it in a learning by doing method, the understanding level of the child is much different. So in the current scenario, with all the current requirements of the testing and scoring part, what you can do is you can introduce the very basic concepts through learning by doing. So the child really understands the core, the crux of the matter, and then you keep on building on that, doing practice of the concept in various different ways that we are already doing. So the point is, in the current system, you would not really detect a hole in the understanding of the child up to the quarter, when you take exams. But when you're doing learning by doing, you can actually see that if the child is not able to perform an activity, you can see the child is not able to understand the concept, and you can help them in the classroom itself, rather than wait for 3 months and then realize that, okay, the child had not understood the concept in first place. So that is the kind of difference that you would like to bring at the ground level. It does not mean that you suddenly switch your view on how things are going to happen, but we need to be mindful that there is a way to reach there, and we need to start now.
Right. And I think that statement that you just mentioned, give a man a fish, you feed him for a day.
Right.
And I think teach a man to fish and you feed him for a lifetime. I think that sums up everything.
Right.
So, yeah, overall, it was a fantastic session, sir. We all know
Thank
that
you.
hands on is especially important in the classrooms because it allows students to engage in the kinesthetic learning that we talk about,
Right.
where they carry out, physical activities rather than listening. And this is popular. It is becoming popular, but still a long way to go,
Yeah.
where students learn, they gain understanding by doing, using some materials, and
Right.
they keep trying. The trial and error method is there. They
Yes. So
don't,
one of
they
the
keep trying.
things, which is very important and at the center of learning by doing is, you don't fear failure. Our
Right,
current system
absolutely.
is geared in such a way that failure is looked as a taboo, whereas in learning by doing, you look as failure as a stepping stone. You try to do something in a different way and then get to the result. So you don't fear failure when you are implementing learning by doing in the classroom. So the children, when they are learning in this method, they have a totally different attitude towards the way in which they gather knowledge and implement it in their lives.
Yeah, they're more confident. True.
Yes.
Very true. Very true. So thank you so much, sir.
Thank you so
I
much.
thoroughly enjoyed the session, and I think my Sunday starting was a kickstart where I started with an activity, and I am very curious and full of energy for the entire day now. I think the teachers, the educators can try the same in their classrooms by engaging students in certain activities where they make them curious. Like I was to know from Amit sir as to what all things are there, what are the benefits, what are the challenges, how we can overcome. So I was glued here, I was listening to him, and same can happen in your classrooms. So, yes, this is something that can bring change in your classrooms. You can manage everything once you decide, you can do it. So, thank you so much, Amit sir. It was
Thank you,
wonderful
Balaji.
having you. Yeah, a big thanks to you on behalf of our entire team. And thanks to the viewers for joining in. If you have any questions, you can post it in the comments section. Sir will definitely try to revert on the questions posted by you. And
Definitely.
do share this video with maximum people. You can motivate around. You can motivate people around to try this now. This is
Sure.
the time to change. So with this, we come to an end. A big thanks to you once again. And we at Global Education and Training Institute, we are committed to transforming education by transforming teaching practices that we were talking about. So do watch out our upcoming teachers training program. Enroll for them, and we shall be launching the pre-service teachers training program in April, and a variety of in-service training programs as well. And for more details, you can log on to our website. You can see it's coming on the banner on screen and the number mentioned there. So, yes, thanks again. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
And thanks, everyone. Have a great Sunday ahead. Take care.